tuned into Breaking the Mask of Depression with your host, Diva with Depression.
Welcome to Breaking the Mask with Diva with Depression. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope everyone is staying safe. I hope everyone is staying healthy. And I hope that you are taking care of yourselves. Today, we're just going to dive right in to what we're talking about today. Today's topic is schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a mental illness that is misunderstood by everyone. Many of us don't know what it is, what the symptoms are, but it's especially misunderstood in Black and Brown communities because we were just never told about this disease. It's not something that is talked about much, and there are many reasons for it. But, like a lot of things that are coming to light nowadays, schizophrenia is something that, we probably saw on television. So, we just passed it off as something that it's not. And so today I want to discuss it, and I want you to know that I don't know anybody personally with schizophrenia, and I wasn't aware of a lot of things until I started researching it. And as a matter of fact, when I started blogging and when I started working with different mental health organizations, that's when I started to become curious about it and become interested in learning what it actually is. And so today we're just going to try to highlight some things and I'm going to share some symptoms with you, and I'm going to share a resource with you at the end so that if you do know someone or if you yourself are living with schizophrenia, you know that there is help out there. So, you know me, got to give you a Google fact first. And in this case, I'm going to be all over the place. 1 minute it may be Google, the next minute it may be WebMD. And so the first slide that I found when I was researching was actually from WebMD. And so it says that schizophrenia is a disorder that affects a person's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly. An exact cause of schizophrenia isn't known, but it could be a combination of genetics, environment, or just the chemistry, the brain structure. There has never really been any one symptom that they can narrow down that says is specific to schizophrenia. There is never really one cause for schizophrenia. Just like a lot of mental illnesses, it could be a combination of genetics and environmental. You just don't know. And so for years, and even today, when you see someone that is suffering from hallucination or, just not behaving clearly, then that might be a symptom of schizophrenia. And so it's sort of mental illness is, and I'm guessing, I try not to make excuses for the industry and for, doctors and scientists or whatever, but mental illness is something that has been misunderstood across the board, and up until recently, and even still, you can have one mental illness and there's not one specific drug for that mental illness, and there's not one specific cause for that mental illness. So you never know what kind of medication to take. You never know what steps to take to treat it. And so schizophrenia is at the top of that list with things that we're not sure of. But when I was looking and it said that schizophrenia translated means split mind. And that reminded me of the, things that you have read and things that you have seen on television and in the movies, that you believe that schizophrenia was someone with multiple personalities, and that, talk to themselves or, would start to daydream or hallucinate. So split mind really made sense to me, when I read it. The downside of schizophrenia is that there is no cure for it. And I don't know that there is any cure for any mental illness that I've come across. Like I share with you, I live with severe treatment resistant depression. And I've been in this game, really in this game since 2006. And the number of medications that I have taken over the years is mind blowing. And there's still nothing that works. There are things that can help me function. There are things that can help me cope with, one symptom at here and one symptom there, but there hasn't been anything that, that has been given to me or on the market that says, hey, that is going to cure treatment resistant depression. And so schizophrenia is in that ballpark also. There is no cure, but at least we know that there's no cure. They're just telling you up front that there's no cure, but that doesn't mean that there is not a way to live with it successfully. So we'll get into that later. And so schizophrenia can last for a couple of years. It can last forever. It all depends on the person. Again, it depends on the environment. It depends on the treatment plan. And like I said, it can't be cured, but after a couple of years, you could be living well enough to maybe not have to take as much medication, or maybe your symptoms start to subside and you start to feel like yourself again. So there's hope. We just have to keep on hoping. Of course, like with any illness, it does require medical diagnosis. So you do need to speak to a doctor to discuss your symptoms and possible treatment. And here's the thing. It could take up to 6 months for them to diagnose you with schizophrenia. That means that, you can go into a doctor one day, a psychiatrist, and start discussing your symptoms. And of course, it'll be trial and error for 6 months to see if that's really what you are living with. Maybe if you're having hallucinations, they will follow, the hallucinations for a couple of weeks. If you are speaking erratically or behaving erratically, then they will follow that for a couple of weeks. And, I guess do the trial error thing with medications and different type of treatment. So, that's a bummer, but at least you will be under a doctor's care. And that's what's important, that you're not ignoring it completely. And so if you feel like, and I'm going to say this several times throughout this broadcast, and I always say it, is that if you're feeling out of sorts, please go see someone, especially if it comes down to hallucinations and, delusions. And, if you feel like, you're not just having an erratic day, but you're having an erratic life, so to speak. You can't, gather your thoughts. You can't, maybe somebody else starts to see that you're behaving out of sorts. And so if this becomes a major problem and it starts interfering with your day-to-day life, and if it puts you in danger or puts someone else in danger, then of course you need to seek help immediately. I always say that, when you start to get sick, and this is with a physical or mental illness, yourself. And so, as a matter of fact, I was just having a conversation with one of my babies. When you're not feeling well, who you are, how you are. And so no one can tell you that, you're faking or, you're being extreme. When something starts to become out of control. And so, pay attention to your behavior. If you are a family member or a loved one, a caregiver on the outside looking in, start to keep track, because there's always a window, where we are starting to spiral. Always. I always say that these things don't happen overnight. And so just start to pay attention and don't brush off anything, especially when it comes to, the hallucinations. All throughout my research and all throughout the stories that I've heard, people that I've spoken to over the past couple of years, the hallucinations and the delusions are the major things that stand out. So if you see that, please, please, please go get help, because the earlier that you get treatment, the more the possibility is higher that you can get it under control. You can improve your long-term outlook. So as I always say, it's key. It's key. Don't be ashamed of how you're feeling. Don't be ashamed of, I remember for years I would go to the doctor, the psychiatrist and the psychologist, and one of the first things they always ask you is, do you hear voices? And I always said, no, because I didn't hear voices. I didn't hear outside voices. I heard my voice. My voice would be screaming inside my head. And, it's sort of like, I always describe it as, they say the devil on one side and the angel on the other side, both sitting on your shoulders. Well, those two were both screaming in my ear, but it was my voice. Whereas when you have schizophrenia and other mental illnesses, it may be outside voices or, voices that don't exist, in reality, but there's a voice nonetheless. So that's not something that you can brush off, and it's not something to be ashamed of, because the first time that I did share it, and I believe it was because I was inpatient one time, and I did share it with a psychiatrist on staff, and it was like a light bulb went off in his head, and he was able to take my treatment plan in a different direction. So don't be ashamed of how you're feeling, because it's okay. It's okay. Like I say, there are so many people around the world that are living with the illnesses that I talk about, that many are talking about. And so we have to keep talking about it, keep getting loud about it. So you not only know your symptoms, you know what to look for in your loved ones. You know how you should be feeling, or how your loved one should be feeling. And so just pay attention to yourself and pay attention to your family members. So when you're having a delusion, you have a belief or an impression that it's a contradiction of reality, so to speak. You accept it as reality, or the person that's living with the delusion has a sort of distorted view of reality, and they argue it. They're 10 toes down for that argument, no matter how much that you show them that that's not reality. They are going to hold tight to that delusion. And so, pay attention to something like that, because that could be, that's more than, that's more than just somebody trying to be right. A hallucination is different from a delusion, because it affects your senses and your senses, and it feels real. It feels like it's really happening, although it might not be happening. And you can't tell that person that it's not happening. A delusion, of course, they're going to double down on that in spite of evidence. And a hallucination also too. The person that's living with this really, really believes that it's happening to them. So those are two of the main things that you should pay attention to. If you or your loved one start to exhibit these symptoms, because you have to get treatment, because once you start crossing the line of severe hallucinations, severe delusions, severe disorganization, then you're starting to slip lower and lower and lower, and your treatment window, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I can't say it enough. I know you guys are going to get sick of me today, but please just pay attention. It's not always a cause for concern. If somebody is having an hallucination here or there, it could be a medication that they're taking, or it could be a symptom of another illness. It could be, alcohol related or drug related, but pay attention for the sign that it's going a little bit further. Erratic behavior, abnormal erratic behavior, things that, people are doing, you see yourself doing, or your loved one doing, that it just doesn't make sense. It's outside of, obsessive. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up, just bouncing from one behavior or one tic to another. Your speech is starting to change. It could get rapid, and your eye movement can start to become rapid. And these are symptoms that just will continue and continue and continue. So if you see that it's going longer than, listen, if it was me, it would be 2 days, but I know some people wait a week. Some people wait longer, just to see whether it is, a side effect of a physical illness. But like I said, today I'm really, really just trying to give you an idea of what some of the symptoms are, and some of the things that you should look for in yourself and your loved ones, so you could be aware. For men, schizophrenia will typically begin in their early 20s. And for women, it typically begins in their late 20s. And they said that puberty affects, is the reason why it's different for men and women. Hormones, this is the one of the times when I guess, hormones are a good thing as far as women are concerned, because it says that the hormonal balance sort of protects women from being affected by schizophrenia, until the late 20s, early 30s. It's very, very rare for young children, babies, young 6, toddlers to live with schizophrenia. There's no reasoning for it. It just, for some reason, through research and following studies, it's never been something that someone is born with, and it just so happens that when it is diagnosed in your late 20s, early 20s, late teens, it's because something else has triggered it. And so the opposite of it being a good thing is true. Puberty can trigger schizophrenia. After your hormonal change in women, that could trigger schizophrenia. So that's another thing that we need to watch out for. Teens, the late teens, and it's really, really funny because I was 16 years old when a doctor told me that he believed that I was suffering from depression and I had an ulcer, and I was 16. So it's interesting that it's always your teenage years that are affected by certain things. But the reason why we don't recognize behavior or illness, mental illness in teenagers, is because we sort of chalk it up to teenage behavior. And I had my air quotes going right now, because I did the same thing with my kids. I didn't know whether it was them, being withdrawn because they were a teenager, or, not talking to me because they were a teenager, or, their school performance or their sleep pattern was being affected because they were a teenager or because they had their period, So I wasn't aware of serious situations that were going on with them because I was confused. I really thought that it was just a teenage thing, So when you see that your teenager is withdrawing from friends and family, they're not doing well in school, they're having trouble sleeping, they're restless, irritable, no motivation, no desire to do anything. It's not always just teenagers. I remember I would come home from school and say I got home from school, and this is, of maybe junior high school, get home at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and take a nap because I was just so tired. And then you're up at 6 o'clock and, life begins again. You do your homework, you eat dinner, blah, blah, blah. And so to me, that's a normal pattern of teenage behavior, like most parents. But when the sleeping is just really off, sleeping all the time or not sleeping ever, staying up for 24, 36, 72 hours. Those are things that you should pay attention to, whether they were mental illness or not. But it could be a sign of something more. Recreational drug use, I know it's supposed to be taboo, but it's not. We're teens, we drink, we smoke some weed sometimes, and some people do other drugs when they're teenagers or experiment for the first time. We'll brush it off at that. But those are actual signs of schizophrenia. And so, if you start to pay attention to those signs, pay attention to the pattern and how long it lasts. Not those symptoms could lead into depression, or they could, lead into bipolar disorder. But it's also a possibility that they're stepping into schizophrenia. Now, compared to adults, teens are less likely to have the delusions, and they're more likely to have visual hallucinations. So, they're seeing things, but what they're seeing, they're believing, and they're doubling down on it. So if you have a teen, or if you know of a teen that has these symptoms long term, and you notice that, their visual hallucinations, get that checked out. Have them, look into it, and pay attention to what they're doing, how long they're doing it. Usually schoolwork, a drop in school performance, to me, is a major sign, other than being tired, and, just being antisocial, because sometimes teens just want to talk to their friends. They don't want to talk to their parents, or anybody in their house. So, but when you start to see them withdraw from their friends and their family, then, speak to someone or have someone in school. I know when I was growing up in school, they had counselors in school, not just guidance counselors, but, nurse counselors, therapists. So if that's what's available to you in your school, then if you feel concerned about your teen, and there are screening exams for everything, so you can Google schizophrenia and look up the symptoms and look up the treatments, and you can take a screening test and see if you or your loved one, if what you're experiencing is a symptom of schizophrenia. So all of these combined, if they combine and severely impact your daily life, then it's something to be concerned with. A lot of people, And I'm pausing because of course I'll get choked up. But a lot of people don't want to admit that they have a mental illness because they're embarrassed. And they also don't want to be treated for life, and that's just not just a mental illness. Who wants to take diabetes medicine for the rest of your life or high blood pressure medicine for the rest of your life? But that's more acceptable than taking medication for mental illness. So when you are diagnosed with schizophrenia, since there is no cure, you are looking at treatment forever, to maintain. Of course, there's medication to get symptoms under control. Of course, there are programs that help you, group therapy, schizophrenia organizations. There are ways to live a full and complete life, but you just have to keep your treatment going and stay under the doctor's care. So, but the key is getting in early. That can improve your treatment plan going forward. So please, I'm begging, baby, please make sure that you go and that's something that you get checked, because early treatment, early discovery, it's key. We have to do it, So here's some morbid things. People with schizophrenia are 2 to 3 times more likely to die early. And this is often due to the mental illness contributing to a physical illness. So another reason why to get in early and get this taken care of. I did a podcast interview. I'm going to share this. I did a podcast interview earlier today with another mental health advocate and mental health professional. And we were discussing schizophrenia and how, people always look down on people that are living with this illness. If you see someone on the street that might be homeless or, might be talking to themselves, or, they might be in a spiral. And a lot of times they are living with schizophrenia and haven't received treatment, but we have just passed it off as, oh, they're drunk or they're on drugs, or, if it's a veteran, oh, they just have PTSD, and it's never checked out. So, we have to start erasing the stigma, and that's why I wanted to come on here and talk about it, because there are 24 million, and this is according to WHO, and this is as of January 2002, 24 million people in the U.S. with schizophrenia. That's 1 in 300 people. 1 in 300 people. That's 1 in, the amount of people that might be in the mall at one time. That's 1 in the amount of people in a movie theater for one viewing, So that's a lot of people. And the rates are even higher for Black and brown people. Blacks are 2.4 times likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Did you know that? I didn't know that until I looked it up. 2.4 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. And that's after 52 different studies in 2018 that was done. I had no idea, because who knew? We don't think that that's, we have sugar, we have high blood pressure, and, we may get a little depressed and stuff like that, but we don't have schizophrenia. That's what they would like you to believe. So that means how many years have we, our loved ones, our ancestors gone untreated because no one knew that this was a thing in our community? The reported psychotic symptoms are highest in Black Americans, 21.1%. Latino Americans, 19.9%. White Americans, 13.1%. The lifeline prevalence of self-reported psychotic symptoms is lowest in Asian Americans at 5.4%. That's pretty scary. That is pretty scary because that means that, number one, we're hiding, we're lying, we're not getting treated, and therefore the cases are not being reported. And let me tell you that everything that I've researched these past couple of months, the numbers are higher than what's reported because, what did I say? These are self-reported numbers. How many of us don't report how we're feeling and what we're going through? So that is, that's pretty scary. You know, I'm going to say that again, 21.1% of blacks, 19.9% of Latinos, and 13.1% of whites, 5.4% of Asian Americans. That's reported. And remember, I said that blacks are 2.4 times more likely to be diagnosed if they report it. And that's out of 24 million people. That is pretty scary because we don't know what's going on. We don't. And so this will lead to symptoms being dragged out. 50% of people that recognize that they may be living with schizophrenia don't take their medication. And that's if they go to the doctor and get diagnosed. They don't take medication. And the term for it is anosognosia, which means that they're unaware of their condition. So that means that you have a large percentage of Black Americans, Brown Americans walking around with this illness that either A, you weren't diagnosed, so you don't know that you have it, or B, you're not taking the medication. And that's 50% of people that are not taking their medication. So lack of treatment and lack of information leads to severe outcomes for people living with schizophrenia, and your life can be shortened by 30 years. 30 years. I'd rather have the time, I'd rather have the medication. I'd rather get treatment and have more time with my friends and more time with my family and loved ones than to ignore it or be ashamed of it. Half of the people that have schizophrenia, have mental illnesses, other mental illnesses, and other behavioral health issues. So that means that if you are not getting treated for your schizophrenia, then that means that you're not getting treated for your depression. You're not getting treated for your anxiety. And it just starts to spiral and roll into a ball. And then, you're minus 30 years of your life. It's not worth it. 24 million people, my friends, 24 million people. Blacks, 2.4 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Let's not let that happen. Let's start listening. Let's start talking. Let's start researching and getting the help that we need. It doesn't mean that we're all going to have, symptoms. It doesn't mean that, if you have a hallucination or you're behaving erratically, that doesn't mean that you're going to have a severe mental illness. But why not get checked out? Symptoms doesn't necessarily mean that you're suffering from something severe. There could be other reasons, but it's better to be safe than sorry than to go untreated. And that's just with anything. What if, if you had a cyst on the side of your arm, that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You're not going to ignore that. You're going to go get that checked out. So think of this as, a mental illness cyst. The longer you avoid it, the worse it can become. And, like with other mental illnesses in the Black community, schizophrenia is scary. It is unknown, and we keep ignoring it. And we can't do that anymore because we're losing each other. And I don't want to lose y'all. So, keep listening, keep reading. Also, when I was talking to the podcaster today, we were talking about, of course, racism and discrimination in the mental illness profession, mental illness field, and how Black and brown people are just completely ignored. And forgive me, I say Black and brown sometimes because, that's just an expression that I use sometimes. But when we do get treatment, we get mistreated a lot of times, or we don't get the medication that we're supposed to get, or we don't have quality health care. So I went and, I did some research, and there was a brief that a psychiatrist wrote, and it's how schizophrenia became a Black disease. And I'm going to read this verbatim. He wrote, and his name was Jonathan Metzl, wrote of the link between schizophrenia and racism. And schizophrenia, he claims, was once seen as a rather benign mental disorder impacting middle-class white women. Okay? Pay attention. So initially, it was just middle-class white women that were getting it. In the 50s and 60s, the 60s and 70s, schizophrenia developed a reputation as a violent disease, and then it was linked to male Black activists during the civil rights movement. In 1968, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, listed dangerousness as a symptom of schizophrenia as a way to justify the psychiatric treatment of Black people that were protesting against injustice. Y'all, my jaw dropped. And they wonder why we are so leery of the medical profession. No, we're not going to just go take that treatment without researching. We're not. People, they labeled us schizophrenic. Black men, specifically Black men, it says here. They labeled them schizophrenic, violent, and dangerous. And they used that as a way to throw them in jail and throw them in mental health hospitals to keep them from protesting against the injustices that we were suffering through. Could you imagine? And that was in 1968. I was born in 1968. This was not like in the 1800s. This was 50 years ago. And so that's why, when we see a brother, walking down the street and he may be talking to himself, or he may, be, his eye movements are off, or he's, his body parts are sort of buzzing and shaking, we automatically, that's a term, that we would, he's schizo, that's a term that people used to use to describe, when we would see our brothers and sisters in the street. If you see a sister on a train, and, I know that I've seen it living in New York, we see them on the train and they're talking to themselves, or, or they get up and they start discussing a theory that they have. And, to them, that theory is real. And we just pass it off. Oh, they're loco. Oh, they're acting schizo. Oh, they're a drug addict. Oh, they're homeless. No, they have a disorder. And they're just thrown in jails. They're thrown in hospitals, and they're ignored, and nothing has changed. We're still ignored. We're still thrown in jails and not getting the treatment that we need to get. So, let that motivate you a little bit. We don't want to continue to be misdiagnosed and mistreated. If you are living with this severe mental illness, you want to get treatment, and you want to live a full life, and you want to kick some ass, okay? Because you want to prove them wrong, okay? I am not less than because I live with schizophrenia. I'm the bomb because I can live with schizophrenia. That's what you want, okay? So listen to me. I'm reprimanding you. Make sure that you get the help that you need. Make sure that you pay attention to these symptoms, because they just keep trying to wipe us out at every turn. And I'm not going to get into on my soapbox, but that article really pissed me off because it just shows you that, like stealing someone's blood, you're just labeling people, and you're labeling wrong. It's just like when you're saying, people with mental illnesses are so violent, and that is the exact opposite, and so that means that if someone is having a delusion or having a hallucination because they suffer from schizophrenia, they're not violent. They're not. They're just sick. And we need to stop letting them label our babies and our brothers and sisters as such. We're kings and queens and princes and princesses, and nobody is without a flaw or two. And I'm flawed. I'm flawed like hell. You guys hear me, when I talk. You guys read my work. You see me in some cases. I'm severely, excuse my French, fucked up sometimes, with these symptoms and this mental illness. But that doesn't mean that I'm not worthy of being treated like a person, a human being. So don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Medication. I share with you guys, medications for mental illness are a bitch and a half. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not. The side effects will have you floored, on your ass in some cases. But usually after 1 to 2 weeks, and I know that that's a lifetime in some cases, but after 1 to 2 weeks, once you've adjusted, you're good to go. You are able to function, and it may not be at 100% initially. It may be 60% or 50%, or, sometimes in my case, 30%. And that's the psychiatrist saying that. But at least I'm functioning, at least I'm able to get out of the bed. So schizophrenia is one of those illnesses where you will have to take medication for the rest of your life. And, that's on paper, and that's what a doctor will tell you. That might not be true. There's always ways around it, or there's always cures, but people are cured every single day. So, you don't have to claim that, but initially you will have to take medication for the rest of your life for schizophrenia. And it's an antipsychotic medication that you will take. And, antipsychotics are usually brought in when there are hallucinations and delusions. One example of a medication is clozapine. And as of now, in this, like I said, this particular article that WHO wrote was in January, clozapine was the most effective antipsychotic for managing schizophrenia. And so patients will have to go through, at least a couple of trials to determine the dosage. And then And that's with anything. I'm going to tell you, I have to see my doctor tomorrow because they put me on a new medication in July and it's not working. So they'll probably have to up the dosage. And that's what they do. That's what they have to do with these medications. So, you go in and they will prescribe clozapine at one dosage and they will just have to tweak it. And like I said, with schizophrenia, they will watch you for 6 months. They will watch your symptoms and they will watch your dosing and adjust it from there. And then, I had a discussion with someone in the mental health field, and they did say that after 6 months, if you recognize, that you have this illness, and that if you are determined to get treatment and determined to work through it, then people go on to live their best lives. You go on and you have families, you go to school, you work, you play, you do everything. It's just a period that you're going to have to adjust to, these medications. But once you find it, once you hit the sweet spot, it's you're living, you're not existing. And, to me, that's a good thing. There are people every day that you pass on the street every single day, you pass in the office every single day, that are taking some type of medication to control anxiety, to control social anxiety, to control depression, to control, bipolar disorder. There are people that are taking these medications every single day, and you would never know it, because they have gone through the trial and they have learned to adapt to life with it. Of course, talk therapy is big, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. You guys have heard me talk about that. The DBTs and the CBTs, those are my enemies. I always run away from them, but that's not because they're not good. It's just that, I like real talk, and DBT and CBT is what they throw at you sometimes when you're inpatient and outpatient. But cognitive behavioral therapy is most effective in treating schizophrenic patients. CBT is best with teaching patients how to manage their thoughts and behaviors and how to identify triggers. And that's important, that's important because I just posted on Instagram that just because when you're spiraling doesn't mean that you can control the spiral. You can't stop it. And that's what that means. That if you are living with schizophrenia and you know when a trigger is coming or when a symptom is coming, you are in control, and that means that you can find a way to coast through it. Like turn into the crash, or turn into, when you spin on ice and they say, roll into it. That's how it is when you identify a trigger. It keeps you from falling. You can get the medication. You can increase your therapy sessions. You can have your affirmations in place. You can have your grounding techniques in place so that you know how to control that spiral. Heck, that you even know that, listen, if the spiral is coming, I'm going to have to take a couple of days off from work. Just like if you fell and hurt your knee, you would take a day off, take a couple of days off. So if you feel a hallucination coming on, if you feel some erratic behavior creeping up, you can go to an event and be triggered. You can see something or read something that will trigger you. If you are living with this condition, then you know that you need to step back and take the necessary action to stop the spiral. And that means that you are living with an illness. You are the bomb because you're living with this illness, and that you have, you have accepted it and you have made sure that you have done what is necessary to control your illness. Guys, it's not a death sentence. Nothing is, it's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean that you're less than. It doesn't mean that the diagnosis says that, you're not going to live to be 100. It just means that you have to take your medication, get your therapy, figure out your grounding techniques, figure out how to live. But don't ignore it. Please don't ignore it, because as I said several times throughout this episode, schizophrenia is one of the most severe mental illnesses, psychosis type illnesses out there. And it could be a danger to you. It could be deadly for you. It could be a loss to you. So the earlier that you get treatment, the better. So, as always, I'm going to tell you that you can always reach out to me, of course. You can always go to my website, divawithdepression.com, and there's a resource section there. And I've listed so many organizations that I have found to be helpful. One, I'm not sure that I have it listed, but I'm damn sure going to list it tomorrow. I'll have my tech person, put it up there. The Schizophrenia and Psychosis Action Alliance. That's sczaction.org. And it's headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia. And I've been working the helpline, guys, for about 2-3 years now. And this has been a great resource for the families of loved ones that are living with schizophrenia, or, people themselves that are living with schizophrenia. But they have resources on there. They have a helpline. They have support groups. They have, all sorts of information about terms and treatments. And, I always say that every illness has an organization. And this is it for schizophrenia and psychosis. So the Schizophrenia and Psychosis Action Alliance. If you are just starting on this journey and you want information, that should be your first stop. Okay? Don't not acknowledge it. You are amazing. You are absolutely amazing. It doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. It does not matter what a doctor says. It doesn't matter what strangers say. You are amazing. And you know why you're amazing? You're amazing because you are beating the odds. And you are living and kicking ass with schizophrenia. Nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. So do the work. Research, read, get treatment, get to a doctor, get the medication, and keep going. Okay, guys, I know that I was a little long to this episode, but I wanted to make sure that I got everything in. I thank you guys so much. If you're listening to this episode, I want to thank you so much for, like I said, tuning in till the end, because I thought that this was a topic that was very, very important, because there are so many unknowns about it. So I'm grateful that you have listened to the whole episode. I beg you to share it. I don't usually beg for shares and likes, but this is something that I beg you to share, because I think that it can save a life, honestly. So share it. You don't have to give a reason why you're sharing it. Just share it, or give a link to it. Share a link to it, so people can start doing the research and start doing the work. Thank you again to Illumination Media and Technology for, of course, always doing a kick-ass job with this podcast. Without him, I would be nowhere. So like, follow, get in touch. He's amazing. Breaking the Mask is on most podcast platforms. If you found this episode interesting, like I said, helpful, pass it along. This one especially, pass it along. Tell somebody about it. And I'm not the only one that has this information. So, there are others out there. Just keep sharing, because we want to get this out. We want to get this information out there so we can change the world. Stay safe, stay well, protect your soul, protect your peace. Keep fighting. I will see you guys over on divawithdepression.com. Say hi on any of my social media platforms. Reach out to me by email. I love you guys. I want you to stay helpful and hopeful. I want you to stay peaceful, and I want you to keep kicking ass. Take care.